Welcome to Blue Ridge Story Space. This is our third time meeting, and we're so grateful that you all came to be with us. We have grown in leaps and bounds, and it's only been 3 months. So we have a special treat for you tonight. He's not here yet. He's been a friend of mine for years, and he is notoriously late. So we'll give him a hard time about that when he comes in. But when I was living in Pittsylvania County in Danville, I was in a writers group with Scott Brooks. And I never knew who Scott was or anything. We became good friends, and somebody in the writers group said to me once, "Hey, you know, Scott published that song, Who Let the Dogs Out?" And I said, "No way." And I looked him up on the internet, and sure enough, Scott Brooks published the song, Who Let the Dogs Out? Is that better? Okay, much better. Okay. So he will be with us tonight. He'll probably come in, he says, about 6 o'clock. So I'll be sure to point him out as soon as he comes in. But he is our guest storyteller tonight, and he will be telling the last story of the night. So for those of you who are new with us, what I'd like you to do is you don't have to stand. I don't want to put you on the spot too much. But I'd like you just to wave your hands if you are brand new, first-timers to Blue Ridge Story Space. Wow. Okay, so about half of you, that's great. So I wanted to, before we get started, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about how this works. And I think most of you have heard, but this is a place where we celebrate the mountain tradition of storytelling. There will be a new theme announced each month, and this month's theme happens to be what? Who remembers? Everybody has one. And you can interpret that however you'd like. So what we do is we have a hat at the front of the room. It stays on the stage all the time. And if you're interested in telling a 5 to 7 minute story with a beginning, middle, and end about this month's theme, then you can put your name into the hat anytime. So you don't have to put your name now. If you're unsure about yourself, you might want to wait until you've had a few drinks or until you listen to a few stories in order to loosen up. But you can come up to the front anytime. We just ask that it's between stories, and you can put your name in the hat anytime. We do ask that your stories are 7 minutes or under 7 minutes. And the lovely Beth Ford in the back, and I'll ask her to ring a maraca, or to shake a maraca. This is what will happen if you reach the 7 minute mark. That's right. That's what happens if you reach the 5 minute mark. So if you hear the maracas shake one time, you're good. You still have 2 minutes left. If, however, you go to 7 minutes, this is what you're going to hear. Double maracas. And so that means just close it up as quickly as you can so we can give equity of voice to everyone. All right, so we're ready to get started? Okay, we're going to get started. I'm going to have you pick the first name.
Should I read it?
Yes, please read it.
Pam Frazier.
All right, Pam Frazier. Please come up.
I think everybody, when we first got the topic, everybody's got one. We all thought opinions and body parts, where that was going to go. That's not where I'm going to go. I was thinking about the area I live in, and anybody that has been here since before Parkway, their families have been here before Parkway. I thought, yeah, I know exactly what everybody has. And then I thought, well, really, anybody below the Mason-Dixon line, everybody has one. And then I realized, as much as I've traveled across the United States and Europe and stuff like that, I realized I don't know of anybody that I've talked to that doesn't have one. And that's a minister in the family. I come from a very, very large family. I can't go to Hillsville without somebody saying, I don't know who you are, but I know you're one of the Pucketts. This random guy on Facebook the other day was out at Puckett Cabin, and he said, Pam, is that your relatives? Yes, it is. In my family, my daddy's family, he was the oldest of 14 children. There was 8 boys and 6 girls. All 8 boys are ministers. if the 6 girls could, our faith doesn't allow it, women to be preachers, the 6 girls would also be ministers. And if you're at my grandmother's house on Sunday, you know they really are. They may not get up in a pulpit, but they're ministers too. I could not have ever learned how much of a sense of humor God has than to stick me into a family of ministers. Each weekend, when I was younger and growing up, it never failed that somebody in my family was there crying, tears just a-pouring. God had called them to preach. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, here we go again. Because this began the journey, from my perspective, of them perfecting their tithing sermon. Like, that one they'll get down pat if they don't get anything else down pat. I spent my weekends instead, trust me, there was no tears or tithing sermons for me. Shut up, Carlisle. I spent my weekends in this big old purple van. I mean, we're talking like grape purple. All of my friends would pile into this van. It had purple shag carpet. Right in the middle of it had this partition. And cut in this partition was a big old heart. Now, this partition had purple shag carpet and beads hanging down, you know. And you went through the beads, and there was this big old king-size bed back there. And you guessed it, purple velvet bedspread and fuzzy pillows. And we had the time of our lives. We'd get in that van, here we'd go. And we'd go down to the river. We'd all strip off, and we'd go skinny dipping, or we'd lay out in the sun. We didn't have to worry about people being inappropriate, of grabbing and whatever is the word for it today. We just enjoyed our life. We stayed there till the sun went down. And when the sun went down, we all loaded back into the van, and we went to, my friend had this great big old teepee. And we all went there and we hung out. And this one friend, he would pick up his guitar every night. And he'd make me smile by singing Mr. Bojangles. And every night when I fell asleep, he would sing Desperado. And I had this German Shepherd dog laying at my feet named Freedom. I learned more about the world and love and God in that one day, that happened a lot, than I ever learned when I walked through the church. But the one thing I did learn from my family, there's so many of us. And I always knew I wanted a big family. I went to college, I got my degrees, I've got 2 degrees, and it was like, but the only thing I wanted was children. I wanted to have that big family that when something went wrong, like I lost my father when he was very young, I had my sister and my brothers there, and I wanted a big family. And so finally I had my first child, beautiful blonde-haired child, and loved her. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Years down the road, I got pregnant again. And I went to the doctor at 18 weeks, and he said, Pam, you're going to have a little boy, but he's going to be severely disabled. We don't know what this is. And honestly, when you think that the severely disabled part should have been what shook me, it was the boy part. I'm like, oh my God, not a boy. Because if it's a boy, he could end up being a minister. Because I knew it's got to be genetic. And I'm like, how's that going to work with this mom having a preacher son who believes love is love, women's rights are human rights, and this whole list of other things that don't mesh with my family. Finally, the child was born. He's now 27 years old. he can't walk, he can't talk. Well, he can walk with braces and help, but he can't talk. He if you see him, you know he's disabled. And he's taught me that regardless of how he looks, he just wants to be accepted. And I learned from him, regardless of how somebody looks, the color of the skin, or if they're my height or this tall, they just want to be accepted. He taught me, even though he can't speak, that he has something to say and he wants to be understood. And I need to look for that in other people. Even if it's the language that I don't speak, try to understand it. And he taught me, when he walks into a room and he sees anybody here, he wants to give you loves. He'll come up and we do Eskimo kisses, or he'll give you a hug. So he taught me everybody just wants love. So at the end of the day, I learned we all have one, even me.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you
so much for sharing that with us.
Okay, here we go. The first time that I met Topsy was 2 weeks after I started dating her son. Her son had thrown the I Ching, and it ended up sending him to the mountains of West Virginia, where I happened to be. And we had dated about 2 weeks, and we were so in love. He said, I've got to take you to meet my mother in Baltimore. And I said, okay, I'm up for it. So we walked into Topsy's home, and she smiled and started asking me about my life, and I realized Topsy was somebody special. And she pointed out in this book that I didn't even know existed, that has the blue bloods. I don't know. I'm a kid from West Virginia, right? Has the blue bloods, and her name is in there. But she approved of me for some reason, and as we were leaving, she said, don't let her go, to her son. So he didn't let me go then. And we had a little boy. And when I was pregnant, I said, I've got to be back in West Virginia. I got to have the baby there. And so we rented an old farmhouse. It had running cold water, no outhouse. I'm pregnant. No outhouse, no plumbing at all. We were back to the Landers. But our landlord said, I'll get you a hole. He was a U.S. Marshal. He put a stick of dynamite in there, and we ended up with an outhouse hole that was bigger, maybe twice one of these, right? So we got a tool shed on the backside, and then we had a 3-seater, and we said we could live here forever, ever. So in typical husband John Ford fashion, he got a floor in, got the poles around there, but that's it. I never had the sides or a roof. So in other words, I had an outhouse gazebo, right? Okay. Now Topsy, whose full name was Monterey Joyce Evans Grindle Ford, Topsy came to visit, and we assured her that she could go to the outhouse in privacy. This farmhouse was 1 mile down a dirt road. We were the only house at the end, and our mailbox sat on another dirt road. So, we were in the middle of nowhere, sitting on the Buchanan River. And so Topsy takes her her crossword puzzle book out and plans to spend some time on one of the 3 seats. I told her she could use any of them, take your coffee, So she goes out and she's sitting there. This is about 9 in the morning. And all of a sudden she came running back in and she said, there's people out there. I hear voices in the woods. I'm like, there's nobody out there. I walk out, and there's 10 Boy Scouts walking this trail. I'm like, this never happens, Topsy. Never. So she went back out, got comfortable, refilled her coffee cup, and she's sitting there, and all of a sudden, she came running back in. She said, somebody's coming down the driveway. And you could hear the gravel crunching, and lo and behold, there's the gas man. In West Virginia, most people have a gas well on their property, and you get free gas to the house, so it's not a bad deal. But once a month, they come down and they check the meter. And wouldn't you know, it was when she was sitting right out there perched above the road with no walls, and here comes the gas man. I said, give him 5 minutes. He's just going to drive up, check the meter. And she's at this point going, I don't know, Beth. And I'm like, no problem. So she goes back out to the outhouse, and she's sitting there, and she's getting comfortable and just doing great when a small plane comes. And remember, I have no roof. This is lattice work, you know? And she's sitting there on the outhouse, and along comes this plane, and he flies right over, and he does the wing thing. And she's like, oh no. Well, it was the landlord, the U.S. Marshal, and she said, he waved at me. She said, I'm going to go into town and get a room at the Bicentennial Inn. She says, I'll be back for supper. So there went Topsy. And another thing, because everyone's got one, so I was thinking, well, most people have a mother-in-law, you know? I mean, we, at one point or other in our life, we have one. And everyone, though, has a bathroom, right? So you at least have, it might not be a 3-seater outhouse, but everybody's got one. And Topsy, she ended up being the most fun mother-in-law. Even though she was a blue blood, she was very proper, beautiful redhead, absolutely a striking person. She was one of those people, you could be hiking out in the woods, you could be halfway up Buffalo Mountain. If it turned 5 o'clock, she found a stump and said, it's time for cocktails. So it didn't matter. So anyway, Topsy in the outhouse, that's gone down in the family annals for sure.
Everybody has one, the worst date you've ever experienced, right? And I have to say, I never really had one until a few years ago. But when I did, oh, it's a doozy. So when I was living in Atlanta about 9 years ago, I came out. I had been married to a man. I had always dated men. And I had always been on Match.com. And so I would put in a woman seeking man. And nobody ever really wanted to go out with me. But man, as soon as I put in woman seeking woman, everything changed for me. And so I had so many dates every week. And sometimes I would go on 2 or 3 different dates a day. I had no idea what I was doing. And I kept confusing the conversations about who I had told what. I could see my wife going crazy in the back. This is before I met my beautiful wife. So I met this woman named Claudia, and Claudia, on our first date, she invited me to do something that I thought sounded really interesting. It wasn't traditional coffee, it wasn't traditional dinner, it wasn't traditional even, let's go see a movie. Claudia invited me to go bird hunting with her. Claudia had these dogs, these 5 Vizslas. And so what Claudia would do is, Claudia and several other people, this is downtown Atlanta, and so Claudia and several other people, they rented farmland about 30 miles south of the city in Griffin, which is really just like this, out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It's beautiful. And so Claudia invited me down there one Saturday, and I went. I didn't really know her. I'd never seen her before. I'd talked to her on the phone a couple times. I'd only seen her picture, and the pictures mostly of her dogs. I think she had set way more pictures of her dogs than of her. So I went down there and met her, and I knew right away she was not really somebody that I was attracted to. However, I was very attracted to the idea of this bird hunting. It just sounded fascinating. I love dogs. And so she assured me that this would be fake bird hunting, that no birds would die in this endeavor. So I was especially okay with that. So one of the first things that Claudia did, I got out of the vehicle, and Claudia said, "Oh, let me introduce you to my dogs." And so, again, she rented this land in Griffin. There was a house on the property. There were kennels back there that were not really in use, but Claudia had brought her dogs there, having rented the property, and so she was there for the weekend with her 5 Vizslas. And the first thing she said to me as we rounded out the back door was, "I really hope the dogs don't bite you." And she chuckled, and I chuckled, because who says that? And who says that seriously? And sure enough, I had known Claudia perhaps 2 minutes when one of her dogs rushed up to me and grabbed me on the hand and bit all the way through, and I could not get the dog to release my hand. And it was a weird situation because you don't exactly want to cry and go into complete hysterics in front of someone you've known 2 minutes. So I had to try really hard not to do that. And Claudia also could not get her dog to set loose my hand. So Claudia had to get the water hose and spray the dog in the mouth and in the eyes and in the nose. And the dog finally let go of my hand. So I'm bleeding profusely. I was never aware that a wound could actually gush like a geyser, but mine was. And this is somebody who I was told not to give blood when I was about 22 years old because there was such a scene afterwards. I fainted. They brought me back. I fainted again. They brought me back. I fainted again. They said, "Child, please don't come back." So I'm about to keel over. You know how you can feel your face go completely white? I felt my face go completely white. And Claudia, of course, is saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then she said, "My God, I'm so sorry I said that. I didn't know they'd really bite you." And then she said, "Well, they did do this the last 2 times. I repeat, she said, "Well, they did do this the last 2 times. So at that point, you know, I have a lot of blood loss. I'm keeled almost completely over. I don't know this girl. I don't know if I'm even capable of driving back. I want to leave, but a part of me, however sick this is, wanted to see the damn bird hunt." So we bandaged my hand. We peroxide me. We poured alcohol in the wound, which was terrible. We poured peroxide. We poured so many things. And we wrapped my hand. So Claudia and I, we were going to ride to the bird hunt. It was a few hundred yards away. And I get into her car, and the first thing I noticed wasn't even the smell. I was unaware that mushrooms and mold could actually grow on plastic. I think there must be there would have to be a lot of dirt in a car for that to happen. So I get in, and I'm thinking, my God, I'm going to get some kind of disease. So I put my hand, as close as I can to where it can touch nothing, because my hand is bleeding profusely. I'm half sick, but I'm determined to see this bird hunt. Claudia gets in. The 4 dogs that didn't bite me, she puts them in the back, and I'm thinking, oh my God, And she rolls the windows up, she closes the door, and I notice the smell. And I said, "Claudia, what's that smell?" And she said, "Well, I think the dogs went to the bathroom on the way here, and I haven't had time to clean it up yet." So I'm half sick, keeled over, but determined to go on this bird hunt. So Claudia and I we go on the bird hunt. It was cool, and we are riding back, and I'm thinking, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here as quickly as possible at that point, because the bird hunt was cool, but it wasn't that cool. and my hand was still bleeding profusely, and I was really half sick at that point. So I get back in Claudia's car. We're going to go the few hundred yards back, and there's a pause. Claudia doesn't get back in her car. And so I look around, and she's trying to get the dogs off the ground. They're rolling, and she finally gets the dogs back up in the car, and we start riding down the road, and there was this, like, the smell on top of another smell. And so I said, Claudia, what is that? And she said, oh, well, sorry, the dogs rolled in, coyote it. And, there's nothing I can do about it now. So we're riding back, and I'm half sick, thinking, I have to get out of here. This is the worst date I've ever had. And I look up, and there's this jar of liquid that's sitting on the windowsill, on the dash. And there's something in it, these little tiny things, and they're swirling and swirling and swirling. And I'm keeled over, and I'm half sick, and this coyote smell and this dog smell is everywhere. And this thing is just whirling, and it's like I'm going into some kind of daze. And I said, Claudia, what is that? And she said, oh, well, that's my tick jar. And I said, your tick jar? She said, yeah, so when I go down the road, it's kind of fun if I just reach behind me, and if the dogs have ticks, I just get them off and I put them in the tick jar. And I've had it there for a few years, and it's almost full. So at that point, I decided I had to get out of there as quickly as possible, which I did. The end.
So, I need to preface this. I'll get to the everyone has one at the end, but I'm going to preface the story with if you're really close to me, my family, or a good friend of mine, you might use the word hypochondriac when you describe me, but it goes beyond that. Like, I'm not really a hypochondriac. I seriously research something and am completely and totally convinced that is happening to me at the moment, whatever that might be called. It's beyond hypochondria. So several years ago, one day, several years ago, long ago, I was taking my son and a friend that I was babysitting in a little jogger stroller for two for a intense walk up some hills and down some hills, and came back and was like, oh my gosh, I have this really bad pain in my lower abdomen area. So I'm Googling it because that's what I do. And, appendicitis, all those little things pop up. And I'm like, it's not like all these things that it's describing. I'm not having that. So it's probably just, I'm okay. So I'm going on with my day. Probably had a glass of wine or 3 or 4, and I'm like it's really starting to hurt now in this lower abdomen area. So I'm Googling. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm starting to experience this appendicitis thing. So I wait till the next day, and it's worse. And then, I forgot this. Several days before that, I had an IUD inserted for the first time, and so I thought, oh my God, surely of all people, weird things happen to me. It really is true. That's not hypochondriacism. But I thought, oh my God, my IUD is piercing through my uterus. It's not appendicitis anymore at this point. It's a IUD piercing through my uterus. So I call my gynecologist, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that the IUD you just had inserted in me is cutting me open. And he's like, no, you're fine. So then I'm like, okay, so back to appendicitis, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going through the motions. It's getting worse. So I go to the doctor. I'm like, it's really bad. And she's like, are you nauseous? I'm like, sure, yeah, I think I'm nauseous. I'm like, so everything she's bringing up, my doctors have since then changed the way they question me because they know it's like weird reverse psychology. If they question me, then yes, I have it. So I'm like, yes, I have that. Oh my God, yes, I have that. Yes, I have that. I'm dying. So my doctor at this point has convinced me, you need to go to the hospital. You're having an appendicitis attack. You need to go to the hospital right now. So I'm like, what? My kids are at childcare. My husband's working in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. Oh my God, what? So I'm crying. I'm driving to the hospital. I'm doubled over, and I'm crying. And I call my husband's boss's wife, and I'm like, I need you to find my husband. I'm dying. And I'm going to the hospital right now, and I can't get a hold of him, and I'm dying. And she's like, what do you mean you're dying? I'm like, I'm not dying yet, but when I get to the hospital, I might die. So I need you to get in touch with him right now. Okay, and by the way, please find someone to care for my children. Like, I'm like planning everything, okay? So I drive to the hospital, and I'm like walking into the emergency room like this. And I go up to the window, and I'm like, my doctor sent me. I'm having an appendicitis attack, and I need surgery stat. And she's like, oh my God, do you need a wheelchair? I'm like, yes, I do. I can't walk. So she gets me a wheelchair. I'm like, thank you so much. And they're like wheeling me back. And of course, I'm just getting like more and more frail as the time is going on, and I'm getting wheeled back. Like, I'm like, no waiting in the ER for 4 hours for me. Like, this woman's dying. Like, we got to get her back. So I'm like, okay, I'm back there, and they're, taking my vitals and everything, and I was just like, oh my God. I'm laying on the table. The doctor comes back. He's like, okay, well, pushing around. I'm like, yeah, my doctor made me come. It's like, yeah, what's right there? And he's like, are you nauseous? I go, yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm totally nauseous. And so then he's like, okay, we're going to do like x-rays and ultrasounds. I'm like, okay, yeah, I think we need to do that. So they're wheeling me up in the bed up there, and I'm like, I know we can't have cell service in the hospital, but I have to try to get in touch with my husband. So my husband calls me, and I'm like, they're taking me up for x-rays now. The surgery won't be long. You need to get here as soon as you can. And he's like, oh my God. I'm like, actually, no, you go with the kids. Be with the kids. I can do surgery alone. I'll call you when it's over. Like, because I'm dying and I'm brave. I forgot that part. So they wheel me up. They're doing the x-rays. I'm like praying to whoever and all that. Oh my gosh, I'm not even close. Okay. And so they bring me back down, and the doctor's like, I'm laying there, and he's like touching. He's like, does it hurt? I'm like, well, when I lay down, it's not so bad. And he's like, okay, well, stand up and make it hurt. And I was like, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm dying. And he's like, stand up and make it hurt then, if it doesn't hurt right now. And I was like, stood up, and I was like, okay, well, it doesn't hurt right now, but it's going to hurt in a little bit. And he's like, okay, so if it's appendicitis, it's only getting worse. So just go home. And I was like, what? He's like, go home. You'll get a fever. It's going to start getting worse if that's truly what this is. I'm like, okay. So I go home, get the kids, get the husband. My husband, I'm like, I just need broth. And so he brings me broth. Tell the neighbor, okay, we're putting you on standby. We're calling you in the middle of the night because I will be going back to the hospital. It's happening. I'm going to die. Like, we need you to come over and watch the kids when I'm going back to the hospital. He's like, okay. So I'm laying on the couch. My husband's like, I'm going to bed. I guess I'll get up at midnight, so I'm going to bed now. We lived in a very, very tiny little 800 square foot place. Bathrooms here, kitchens here, bedrooms here. So my husband goes to bed. I'm laying on the couch. I call my sister, who's a registered dietitian. She's like, tell me what you're doing. Like, what are your symptoms? What's going on with you? And I'm telling her. She's like, oh, that does kind of sound like gallbladder or appendicitis or something crazy like that. I'm like, yeah. I can't even hardly walk. So I get up, and I'm talking to her. I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom or something. I'm like walking to the bathroom, and I go in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, I sit down on the toilet to use the bathroom, and all of a sudden, and I'm really not exaggerating this, it's like a massive, like the fart to end all farts. The fart to end all farts. And I stood up, I go, oh my God, I can stand, I can talk, I can walk, oh my God. I just needed to fart. And my husband's in the bedroom next door, and he goes, So, ladies and gentlemen, everyone has one. A good fart.
Okay. So bottom line up front, everyone has a doubt about whether they chose the right path. Right? That's my bottom line up front. So, so I always wanted to be a rock star. I was a young musician, learned to play guitar, spent a lot of time doing it up in my bedroom. Any Neil Young fans out there? So you know the song Don't Be Denied? Like that was the song that made me want to be a rock star. I heard that song, I cradled that song in my hands, I like soaked it in, and it was like, yeah, don't be denied, you know, live that dream, you know. So I knew some people. I'm from Charlotte. I'm actually up here visiting friends, and we're going to the country store later to hear some music, and I have my eldest child with me, so I have to think about that a little bit, but it's a good story. It's a crazy story. So I knew some folks in Charlotte when I was coming up in high school who had a band, and they were doing pretty good. You know, they shall remain anonymous, but they were touring around. They were riding on the coattails of the early sort of Southeast wave of like REM and the B-52s, and they were getting out there, and they started making records and touring around. So I'd been friends with them since, you know, I was pretty young, and I went off to school. I went to Warren Wilson College, where many people can claim what I can claim, which is that they went there for a really long time and they didn't graduate from there. I was a student there, and after 3 years I decided, well, I really want to study music. You know, I went to UNCA and I studied jazz guitar for a year. It was too hard, so I quit that. I went back to Warren Wilson, and so I've been in school for 4 years at this point, and I went back to Warren Wilson first semester, and then my friends who've been touring around, they made this record. It was produced by Ed Stasian. He was a big producer. The cover art was by the guy that did like a Michael Jackson album cover. It was like, wow, on videos on MTV, and they were touring around, open for the B-52s and stuff, and their band broke up. So we were hanging out. I had pretty good chops at that point because I've been studying jazz guitar for a year, you know. And we'd stayed in touch over the years, and I was really interested in what was going on. So they decided to start a new band. And long story short about that, I was asked to be in the band. So I'm like, I'm going to be a rock star. This is amazing, you know. And so the thing was, it was right then, grunge happened, and we were this kind of, you know, sort of fusion of like disco beats and like buzzsaw guitar and a singer who was kind of post-punk Southeast, like kind of atonal singer, a little bit, you know, and so, and that figures in the story too. So anyway, we made some records, we toured around, you know, we really were road warriors. We ran around and played, and we never really made that much money. It was like, we just never, it was like Spinal Tap the late years. We didn't get the, you know, where's the dressing room and where's the hotel room and where's the big, you know, guarantee, you know, the $5,000 gig, you know, we never had that. So anyway, so a good gig for us would be, you know, a guarantee of $500. I was like, yes, you know, and then somebody's couch to sleep on, you know, that was a good gig on the road. So anyway, one time in my frustration on the road, in the back of the van, which I spent a lot of time in the back of the van, miles and miles, you know, I made the mistake in my frustration of saying out loud to our singer, "You don't know anything about music." And it was a really, and at this point, you know, the reason they started a new band is because the first band had been a democracy, and they wanted to call the shots. So we were the young upstarts, me and my buddy John, the drummer. He's my best friend growing up, and we learned to play together, and I brought him into the band. So I made the mistake of saying that, and then I got this call from her, I think the next day, that was like, I can't be in a band with somebody who thinks I don't know anything about music. And it's like, yeah, wow, so you're out of the band. and we had struggled along. We made some records. We had this really interesting body of songs that we'd worked up, and I'd written the music on a lot of them. I was really proud of this stuff. And I was like, I got to make the record, you know. So I'm being kicked out of the band on the E. Well, what are we going to do about the record? Well, you can teach the parts to another guitar player, and they'll record for. I was like, geez, this is harsh, you know. And I instantly regretted, you know, but it was sort of, you can't unsay the thing. And it was true, by the way. She didn't know, you know, it's just true. And I hate to say that, and it doesn't mean she wasn't a good singer or very charismatic, you know, performer, but she just did, you know. So anyway, John, my friend, the drummer, drummers are kind of diplomatic anyway. They don't worry about what key you're playing in. It's like, you know, okay, whatever, you know, I got the beat, you know. So he was the diplomat, and he talked to her, he talked to me, you know, yeah, I want to patch it back up. I want to apologize, you know. She's like, okay, yeah, I can let him back in, you know. So we have this moment, the détente. So we arranged to meet at this gig we got. It's a $500 guarantee. It's a good gig, right? In Rock Hill, South Carolina, at this billiard place. It's like a billiard hall, maybe bigger than this room, with like 9 billiard tables. The leather pockets, you don't put coins in it. It's like you go pay the guy and you get the, whatever. You get the balls and you put them on the table, and they're full. Everybody's playing pool. So we have a table in the corner, and there's a cue corral in the corner. So we have this big conversation, heart to heart. Oh, I really want to make the record. It's so important to me. I'm really sorry I said that to you. We hug it out. All for one, one for all. The Four Musketeers. A lot of years in this thing. I've been doing it for like 5 years at this point. So then, right when we have that moment, and the music room is in the other room. So there's 2 rooms to this place: the billiard room and then the music room. We had set up and had a sound check in there. So this guy comes in. And he's stark naked. He has no clothing on. He comes in from the other end of this billiard room, and he starts knocking people's pool balls around, like at their tables. And everybody's like, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" I'm like thinking, "What? He's naked, completely naked." And so he makes his way over to the corner to the cue corral, and he's facing away from us. We're looking at his clenched butt cheeks, and he's facing the cue corral, and he sort of pulls like 3 or 4 of them out, and right then he's jittery. I'm thinking this guy's tripping on acid, And so John, the diplomat, the drummer who just put the band back together, turns to the guy and says, "Hey man, are you all right?" And the guy is facing away from him, and he's holding a pool cue, thick end up, right? And he just turns around and he just swings the pool cue at our drummer's head. The drummer throws his arm up. John, my buddy, he throws his arm up. Pool cue breaks over his arm. I'm running. I'm like, oh my God. The guy starts throwing pool balls everywhere. So we run out of the room, and the next thing I think is, I'm running from a naked man. This is crazy. He's naked, he's vulnerable, but somehow he's very intimidating. So we all run outside. The guy runs out a different exit into some bushes. The cops pull up. He's in the bushes. They pull him out of the bushes. The cop sprays him with pepper spray, and this white guy who we find out later is a student at Winthrop University, which is a private school. He's a white private school university kid, is screaming after he gets sprayed with pepper spray, "I ain't no Rodney King! I ain't no Rodney King!" We're like, oh my God, So anyway, summing up, some drummer's arm is swollen up. He's got a softball swollen lump on his forearm, and we can't play the gig and it happened on the premises. Drummer got assaulted. We can't play, so we get paid not to play. and just to sum up, so the 2 big takeaways for me. First of all, our drummer didn't want to press charges, and I never understood that, because I would want justice. I would want that guy to be accountable, But the everybody has one. So, if there was ever an omen of like, maybe I shouldn't have decided to stay in the band, this could have been it, But then I think about it now, this is half of my life ago. I have been married for 20 years. I have 4 beautiful children. I'm a lawyer now, which is really weird. And I think, if I hadn't made the decision at that moment to stay in that band and, then see this thing happen or whatever, maybe I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have the life that I have. So everybody has that doubt, but don't doubt yourself, because whatever it is, whatever you could have done, it's what you have that matters, right? So, all right. Thank you.
So I'll get the theme out of the way right away. It's we were on farts before. This is brain farts. Have we all had one? So my wife Kathleen and I were recently in Australia and New Zealand, and I had been in New Zealand 32 years earlier. And I was there to collect a bank account money that was going to get confiscated because I had been picking kiwi fruit back in 32 years ago. But in retrospect on a trip, the things that really count on a trip are the people that you met. And Robin Campbell and Wendy Campbell were some people that I had befriended back in New Zealand 32 years ago. And I always thought, well, in this trip, that's who I really wanted to connect with. And I looked in my address book, I couldn't find him. I went on Facebook, did the usual sort outs, and couldn't find any connection with Robin, Wendy Campbell in Roanoke, New Zealand. And yet, so I did a little bit of investigation. This was like 6 weeks into our trip, and I was realizing this has been weighing on my mind that I needed to go find him. And finally, we got to the day where we got to Nelson, New Zealand, and then went out to Roanoke, a small town. And this was the day that I was going to try to find Robin and Wendy Campbell. And so I had done a little bit of investigation before, and I had gone on Google Earth, and I said, I think I could find the house again. I had been picking kiwi fruit, and they were my neighbors across the road. And so I figured I could find that, and I had also had a slide of Robin and Wendy and their 2 little kids that were 7 and 4 at the time. This was back in 1985. And I had emailed it to myself, so I had the phone. Of course, the email got lost, but it was still on my wife Kathleen's phone. So this was the day that I was going to try to find him. And of course, he hadn't been on the internet, and I thought, well, maybe that's a good sign. Maybe he's lived this perfectly happy life, and the technology had just bypassed him, and all would be well, and I would find him there. And maybe it's a bad sign. Maybe I couldn't find him because he wasn't to be found. So, again, like I said, this is 6 weeks into our trip, and finally went out there, and I went to the house, and I was pretty sure that this was the house, a little bit more overgrown. And I walked up to the kind of ground level window there, and there was a woman there working on some craft project. And in typical New Zealand style, this woman with a friendly face says, smiled at me, come on in, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I'm looking for Robin and Wendy Campbell who used to live in this house. She says, I really can't help you with this. She says, in all honesty, I just bought this house about a year ago, and I really don't know much about I've just lived here a few months, but I'll tell you, there's a woman, Mrs. Robinson, in Roanoke, which is about the size of Meadows of Dan, and she's lived here all her life, and she's really my go-to person for anything that needs to be known around here, and I'm sure she can help you out. And she wouldn't mind if you just sort of knocked on her back door too. So found her address, and again, went there, and a friendly woman answers the door and says, what can I do for you? Come on in. And I said, I'm looking for Robin and Wendy Campbell. And she just looks at me and says, I just can't help you with this. And I said, well, they lived in this house out on Dehradun Road. I'd remembered that. And she goes, fine. And I said, wait a second, I've got this photograph I can show you. So I went out and got Kathleen's phone, and I looked at this photograph, and there it was, this young family, nice young couple in their early 30s, 2 little kids, 7 and 4. And she looks at that photograph, and who does she zoom in on but the little 4-year-old girl, probably the one that's changed more than anything. She said, that little girl used to be a really good dancer. As a matter of fact, I think she danced locally around here and performed, and she even took dance classes with my little girl. I said, yeah, her name was Vidette. And then she looked at the couple and she said, you're talking about Robin and Wendy McGregor. And Campbell, McGregor, Scottish names, okay, I've done a little substitute there. And it wasn't even one of those things that, oh, you stupid jerk, of course it was McGregor. I just went, well, if you say so. I had done the old-fashioned switchboard operators, where they just put the cord in the wrong thing. I had done the complete brain fart. Robin and Wendy Campbell were really Robin and Wendy McGregor. And she said, well, yes, he works in an accounting office. I said, well, he sold insurance. She said, yeah, well, let's just call him up right now. So we call him up on the telephone, and here this has been weighing on my mind. I mean, it's been going on for weeks in my brain. And she says, and he, of course, has no idea, and I call him up on the phone and say, Robin McGregor, think back 32 years. An American guy was bicycling down Dehradun Road. You were mowing your lawn. You stopped to have a conversation. You invited him in for supper, and then spent the night there. And then you said, hey, you're looking for work? There's a kiwi fruit farm across the way, and my wife's working in the packing shed. Would you like some work? And I said, sure. And we were neighbors for 3 weeks. And he says, why, Peter? We've always been wondering what had happening to you. He says, well, that's really good to hear from you. And so he says, well, I'm retired. I'm just about to retire right now. My business is sold, but I'm still working here. But we've lived in Motueka now, and here's my address. And Wendy will be just glad to see you, and I'll be there in a few hours. So sure enough, found number 2 Jocelyn Road in Motueka, and there was Wendy. I could have recognized her on the streets. And we got to talking right away. Kathleen, who'd never been part of the equation 32 years ago, was just immediately part of that story. And Robin shows up a couple hours later, and we just continue our conversation where we had left off 32 years ago, and we spent 2 nights with them and just had this amazing time. And I did fess up the story, and I said, yes, we all have brain farts. So at any rate, and there's a good chance they may be coming to Meadows of Dan and Floyd in a couple of years. So at any rate, that's the story. All right. Okay.
I wasn't going to do this, you guys. So if anybody else out there is thinking, I'm not going to do it, just do it. Just do it. And I want to say, look how beautiful the artwork is. This person's amazing. All right, so my story is a bad road trip. And I think everybody's had one. I have had many, but this one beats the cake. Tops the cake? Beats the cake? Something about a cake. Tops the cake, right? Takes the cake. That's it. All right. So I traveled with the Renaissance festivals for 14 years. So I've had many, many trips across the country. And this one I was going from Colorado to Minnesota. 4 states, you guys. It's 4 states. And I was going with a friend, Becca, and her puppy, who was like 9 weeks old, and my 2 puppies, who were about 7 or 8 months. And it started off fine. I was very excited to go with her. I had just bought this little trailer, and she had this big van that she had just bought. So plenty of room. We weren't going to stay in the trailer. We were just one night, one day trip. We could make it because there's 2 of us. So Colorado, we got about an hour out from where we had started, and there is an awful smell coming from the back of the van. And we looked back there, and it was just poop everywhere because of 3 puppies. So, all right, we pull over, we take pillowcase covers off and scrub off areas of the bed and continue on our way. All right, you can throw away a pillowcase cover. That's easy. It's not a big deal. And then about another hour down the road, there's a bad smell from the back, and there's more poop all over other areas of the van. So we stop and we scrub and we get that cleaned up. And this goes on for about 4 hours of stopping and picking up poop. But then they were out of poop, so it was great. And we made it into Nebraska, the next state. And we got about halfway through Nebraska. The west part of Nebraska is really beautiful. It's amazing. And then you get to the east part, and they're like, ooh, just nothing. And we were in the nothing zone, and we blew a tire. And we both had never changed a tire. We had had somebody show us how to change a tire, but that means nothing when you have a van and 2 girls and a trailer and you don't know what to do. So this was on the van. We waited. Somebody came right away and helped us, and we changed the tire. But we had to go to a gas station to get a tire. So that was a good 2-hour delay of driving with 3 dogs who are not feeling well. And then we start going, and about 2 hours later we stopped for food, and I realized I left my wallet at that place 2 hours back. Yeah. So we call, and I'm like, do you please have my wallet? Yeah, they had it. Okay, great. So we drive, 2 hours back and pick up the wallet, and we're on the road, and we're feeling good. And then when we get to Iowa, and it is time to stop. We weren't going to stop for the night, but we're stopping. We've had a long day. And we get to the hotel that we thought would be like, you get in and relax, and it's going to be so nice. No, it wasn't. There was a framed picture with bugs in it, so then you have to wonder what you're sleeping on. But it didn't matter. At that point, we were like smuggling the dogs in, and we're like, all right, well, we have dogs that might poop on your carpet, so okay. And then we quickly left the next morning. And about 20 minutes into that part of the road trip, we blew a tire on the trailer, which we didn't realize for a little while. And we had semi-trucks like honking, and we're like, yeah, hey, okay. And then finally we realized, oh, hey, that doesn't feel right. Maybe we should pull over. We pull over, and yeah, the tire, it's gone. We probably really killed the rim and everything. So we unattach the trailer, and we drive 20 miles to the next place that will have a tire, and then we come back around, and the trailer isn't there. Well, it's there, but it has fallen down. Oh, I'm only on Iowa. Okay. It's fallen into this embankment, into a farmer's land, and the top has popped off of the trailer. So we just ditched it. I feel really bad for that farmer and for whoever had to deal with our mess, but we're like, what are we gonna do? We didn't know what to do. So I grabbed a few things out of it and we took off. We made it to Minnesota. We were 2 hours from our destination, and she said, gosh, my oil light just came on. So, well, stop immediately. Let's check it. Okay, she gets out and she checks it. She said, no, it's fine. It's like green and everything. It's full. It's green? What's green? She's like, well, what I checked, it's green and it's full. I said, show me what you checked. It's her coolant. So the entire road trip she had been checking her coolant. It was a new van. So I was glad that we stopped immediately and we waited. And I was like, all right, it's Minnesota. It's the land of my people. They are really nice and kind, and someone's going to stop right away. 2 girls, 3 dogs, like, people are going to stop. 2 hours later, we get our first person that stops, and it's this young kid, and he asks if we want to smoke a joint with him. And my friend's like, yeah! And I'm like, no! We don't know who this is, no! And then a moment later, a state trooper, a guy pulled up, and he said, oh, I'll take one of you into town. And I'm like, I will give you $20, and if you come back with oil, then that's great. And then he took off with our $20, and then a state trooper pulled up, and he's wondering what we're doing, and I explained the situation, and he said, well, I'm sure that guy will come back. And I said, well, let's hope. And he left, and then about 20 minutes later, the guy who had given $20 to, he did come with oil. I know, so nice. And we made it. We finally made it to our destination, full of poop and bed bugs and no trailer, but we made it, and that's the important part.
Yeah, I never imagined I would do this, but again, I got inspired. That's what I'm loving about this story time. And since I'm working on a memoir, I realized, okay, I could write a little bit about it. But the thing that I realized with the theme, something we all have, is a dream. And that brought me back to my first real dream as a new young adult graduating from college was California Dreamin'. And now I can't remember. Was that John Denver wrote that? Anyways, that was the song of the time. This was 1969, which was a pretty well-known year at the time. And I had gone to school at Cornell University, upstate New York, and had always lived in New England and, that far east. And a few of us decided we were going to go to California, and a friend of mine from my childhood, she was going to go out there having visited her family, and she's going back. She actually had a house in Berkeley. So she said, okay, Jane, you got to come. So the 3 of us other women got enough money together to buy a funky old car, and they had a little Volkswagen Beetle and a big dog. And so we went together, and of course we just kept driving. We didn't have money for a motel or anything. So half the time I was sleeping in the back of the Beetle with the big dog, and the other time I was driving the other little funky car that we had. We made it. It was just incredible for me. I'd never crossed the Mississippi. It was so big. And then to go to the plains where you look 360 degrees and there's nothing but plains, flat, flat, flat. And then you start to see the Rockies coming up, and they get closer and closer and closer. And then we get to go through the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it was the best high in the world. Anyways, we head there, and I get to Berkeley, and we get there, and okay, got to find a job. So I get drawn to this motel. I go, well, what the hell? I'll be a maid. They needed a maid, and I thought, okay, I could try that. And turns out my high school girlfriend had taught me how to make what her mother called hospital corners, which are these square corners, and that's what the guy who was going to hire me said, do you know how to make square corners? Oh, yeah. So I get the job. Well, I had gotten my degree in sociology, and so I'm always kind of studying people and the way people work together and how they do things. And it was fascinating being a maid in a motel, because that was a whole job that is so important in this world, but people don't about it, they don't care. And the way I would be treated by different people because of my job. What totally blew me away was the truckers. They would come in and they'd have pictures of their wives and kids. They'd set them up on a little desk, and then they would, I'd ask them about them sometimes. We'd get into conversations, and they would leave the biggest tips of anybody, and they were so grateful and thankful. It's like, what, truckers? So again, it was another learning experience about different people. And then I shifted to a fabric store, and because I love sewing, and I started making clothes for a little boutique and everything. That helped my money thing. And then this young man came in, and he was got the job as stock boy. And I learned he's from Stockbridge, Mass. And I thought, okay, the stock boy from Stockbridge. And it turns out he was a friend of the brother of Arlo Guthrie. And when he came out to the San Francisco concert space out there, he took me, and I got to meet him backstage, and that was really fun. And years later, just a few years ago, it's been more than a few years, Arlo Guthrie came to Roanoke. I got to go there, and I got to talk to him. And we remembered the boy, but neither of us could remember his name. But besides Stock Boy from Stockbridge, going up those hills outside of Berkeley were just beautiful, because those manzanita bushes would become alive. They were just, anyways. The Altamont Concert was happening. That was called the Woodstock of the West, and I had missed the Woodstock of the East because I didn't have the money to go, and even though I was close by. So I said, okay, stock boy, I'll treat you. Well, as many of you may know, it was not a great concert. And we get there, and everything was going wrong, and finally when, my favorite band in the world was Crosby, Stills and Nash, and when one of them gets up and says, okay, if you've got it together, leave. So we're going out, and the Hells Angels, which were one of the reasons why that concert was such a bummer. Anyways, my attitude. They were screaming at us, get out of here, get out of here, and it turns out the Rolling Stones were landing on helicopters right above our heads, and so we had to get out of there. We managed to make it out. We got home. But then later, after we recovered from all of that, I got into hiking up in the Rockies. And the truth is, that is the best high in the world. And it was getting up there after days of just drinking clean water and healthy food and hiking and getting up to those altitudes that it totally, literally grounded me. And I won't go any further other than to say, because of that experience, it then led me I went back to graduate school, studied environmental education, and then ended up becoming a potter. What? It's a whole nother story, but it's all a part of that got me here in Floyd.
Okay, we're almost ready for our final storyteller of the night. But first, I have to do this. Oh, it's not going to be loud enough. Oh, I'm trying to play Who Let the Dogs Out. Actually, you know what? I think we can all just say it. Okay, 1, 2, ready, go. Who let the dogs out? Woo, 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 woo. So I have to say, before he comes up, this makes me feel really old, but I think, Scott, haven't we known each other since probably 2002 or 2003? Something like that. How that has been 15 years ago blows my mind. But I met Scott Brooks when I was living in Chatham. Scott was living in Danville. We were a part of the same writers group. And Scott is a writer of so many things, such a talented writer, a writer of memoir, a writer of fiction, a writer of graphic novels, a writer of songs. He has produced at least one song by none other than Prince. And my favorite thing about Scott is not only how unintimidating he is, because somebody who has accomplished so much in his life, he has won a Grammy as well. I always had this perception that those would be the people who would be the least down to earth and perhaps the least helpful. And in my career as a writer, he's actually, and I don't know if I've ever told him this before, but he's been one of the most important people in my writing career, because Scott owned a magazine. You still own it, right? Showcase? Scott owned a regional magazine back when I was a young writer in 2002, 2003. And Scott noticed my writing in the writers group and said, "Hey, I really like what you do. I want to publish you." And so that became a catalyst for me as a writer, and getting feedback from Scott, getting feedback then from being published in Scott's magazines, propelled me to be able to accomplish my dreams and to become a memoir writer. So thank you, Scott. So I introduce to you Scott Brooks.
Well, I don't think anybody can live up to that introduction, so I'll do my best. All right, so back in the day, I used to run a hip-hop label, and we used to put out booty music, dirty South booty music, right? And we had a few little hit songs, and then we stumbled across the song Who Let the Dogs Out. We put that out, and that was a nice hit, pretty successful, and it kind of put me on the radar and gave me a little clout in the music industry. And around the same time, Prince was kind of disenchanted with the major label music industry, and he wanted to go independent. So the stars aligned, and my company was able to release a Prince song. So my partner and I, we had kind of different agendas on this Prince song. I wanted to impress Prince and be able to release a Prince album and maybe work with Prince. And I sent Prince a couple of demos that I had written of songs. My business partner wanted to sell more booty records, right? So Prince sent us the master. Prince sent us the artwork for the CD single. And then we did the unthinkable. We put 2 snippets of booty records on Prince's CD single without telling Prince. Okay? So that cringe that you just felt? Yes. Yes. So we put the song out. It sells pretty well. It's a deep cut R&B song called You Make My Sunshine. And it's doing really well. Prince makes a video for it. It's selling. It's playing on BET. It's doing well. And then apparently somebody showed Prince the CD single, and I get a letter in the mail from Prince that says, in summary, let's make sure I get this right now, breach of contract, cease and desist, booty record. So as you can know, most people in that case would just be distraught and destroyed. But I was ecstatic because Prince knew who I was. So, like, I was super happy. So I wrote Prince a letter back and apologized to him profusely and explained to him how we had invested all this money in the single and we had all this promotion going on. And we sent him his first royalty check. And I didn't hear anything back, so we kept selling the record. A couple of months passed. I get a phone call. I answer the phone, and I answer the phone, this is Scott, because somehow I never think the person calling me knows who I am. This is Scott, and there's silence on the phone. And I can hear somebody on the other end of the line, but nobody's talking. So for some reason, I just sit there on the phone. All of a sudden, I hear this deep, sexy voice say, "Who's this?" And I said, and I was like, "This is Scott Brooks." And then he said, the deep, sexy voice said, "I know who this is." I immediately recognized Prince's voice. And you can listen, you know how you can do 10,000 hours or something to become a professional at anything? Yes. I had listened to 10,000 hours of Prince music up to that point. I was a Prince professional at that point. My voice swelled up. I could not speak. So I'm on the phone with Prince. There's nothing I can say. It's silence for a while. He pauses. Next thing he says is, "I listened to your record." Okay, so if you've heard people say your heart skips a beat. Up until that point, I thought that was just a figure of speech. But when your heart actually skips a beat, the electrical charge goes through your body to like restart your heart. I felt that. That was like the best moment of my life. Prince had listened to my record. So the next thing he said was, "And I liked it." So I will admit that at that point I started crying. So I am steady balling, and I'm sure Prince has been on the phone with many people and have been used to people not speaking when he's talking and just being tongue-tied. I'm not sure he's used to people just bawling, crying on the phone with him, right? So Prince says, "You should record that song for real because you're an artist." And so it's crazy, right? And then the next thing Prince said, and so at that point I'm bawling, crying. There's nothing I can do. I'm gone at that point. Prince says, "And once you realize you're an artist, you won't want anybody spitting on your record. Spitting on your art. You won't want anybody spitting on your art." Right? I knew what he meant. I clearly had spit on Prince's art, and I'm pretty sure he said spit. Okay? I'm pretty sure he said spit. I didn't say anything. In my mind, I apologized profusely and everything, but I said nothing, and then Prince said, "We're good." Click. And it wasn't like a click, like a cell phone click. It was like one of those old rotary dial phones where it's like, ka-ching, click. Like he just hung up on me. "We're good." Bam. Right? So this is the one story I've never told anybody. That's how that fits into this theme. I've never told anybody this story before. So I get off the phone. I don't tell my business partner I just talked to Prince. I don't tell anybody in my family I just talked to Prince. I carry this story with me for a long time. 5 years pass. Okay? I get an overnight letter at my office, an overnight envelope from Paisley Park. Now, Paisley Park is Prince's compound, his world, whatever, the Prince world. I got an overnight letter from Prince World. And I open it up, and there are 2 VIP tickets to a Prince exclusive show in Vegas 2 days later. And it's at a club, so there's only 1,000 tickets sold, and they were like $500 each. But I had VIP tickets that allowed me to see the sound check. So I immediately get plane tickets, right? I take my girlfriend with me, who later became my wife, who later became my ex-wife, and that's a whole totally different story. We go to the Prince show. We land at the airport. We go straight from the airport straight to the nightclub he's playing at. There's a long line of people, and we skip the line and walk right in, VIP. There's like 10 people inside around this nightclub. So we take up a place right in the middle of the floor, facing the stage, to try to, have a good vantage point. and we start hearing, a guitar playing. And there's a Prince guitar playing. It's Prince playing guitar, and he's clearly backstage, doing a sound check for his show, playing his guitar. And this goes on for about 10 minutes, and we're staring at the stage, and nothing's up there, right? And you know how when somebody's looking at the back of your head, and it starts to burn, and you just like immediately jerk your head around to see who's staring at you? Well, I did that. And when I did, directly behind me, 1 foot behind me, was this red velvet couch that wasn't there when we walked in, but was now there. And spread out on this couch is Prince in pajamas playing the guitar. Right? So I look down at Prince, and he looks up and just starts bawling laughing like he's in on some joke that he's been behind me for 10 minutes playing music, and we didn't know he was back there, right? So we're standing there, and when you're at a show at a concert and you're staring at somebody on stage for 2 hours, you can never look away from them. But when someone is 1 foot in front of you and you're staring at them playing the guitar, at a moment you start to realize I might be invading their personal space, right? So I take a couple of steps back from Prince to give him a little room or whatever, and he's playing some Prince songs, playing through his various Prince songs, and then I start to hear a melody of a song that I recognized that it wasn't a Prince song, right? And so Prince is down there playing, laying on his couch, playing. This melody goes like this. It was, no, hold on. He goes, no, 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 no. So that's the melody Prince is playing on the guitar. The song I had sent Prince 5 years before was called Invisible Man, and it went, you see clear through me like an invisible man. Whoa. It registered for me at that moment that Prince was playing my song directly in front of me. So, when in a movie or in a Broadway play, when everything goes black around you and it gets illuminated, and they're trying to prove us, and they're trying to show us a real moment, right? Well, that happened for me. It was like a for real moment, right? And Prince is he plays like a minute of the song, right? Of the whole various parts of the song. And I have no idea where I am. I could have been anywhere in the universe. I'm on a different plane of existence. Whoever was with me was no longer there. And I'm in that moment. And I never leave that moment. And eventually, I assume that Prince got up and walked backstage and got ready for the show, and somebody came and got that couch and moved it, right? But for me, Prince just disappeared, right? He was there, and then he was gone. And I don't remember anything that happened at the show. I'm sure it was a great show. But I never told my girlfriend that was with me that was my song. I never told anybody in my life until tonight this story. Because it was my story. It was the one story. You know how you hear people who have a traumatic event happen in their childhood and they carry around this crazy, sad story their whole life, and it tortures them through their entire existence and it forms who they are as a person? Well, this was the exact opposite for me. I carried around this positive, happy story that was just my secret, right? And today, it's time to let it out. Thank you. Thanks to Crystal for inviting me. It's been a blast. Y'all guys' stories were awesome. I enjoyed them very much.
God.